The meeting room was deep underground, hidden beneath layers of steel and concrete somewhere near Geneva. Only a handful of people in the world knew it even existed. Those who did called it the Chamber, though officially it was the Central Hall of the Dark Matter Council, a global task force made up of the best scientists, military minds, and government observers. They met only when something unusual was discovered in space, something that couldn't be explained through normal science. That morning, everyone in the chamber expected just another routine session. The topic was supposed to be about dark energy readings near Jupiter. Nothing about it sounded alarming. These kinds of signals often turned out to be space dust, magnetic interference, or simple data glitches. People entered the room calmly, some chatting quietly, others reviewing files. But as the large digital screens came to life, a strange silence slowly replaced the murmurs. At the far end of the table sat Ambassador Voss, the council's chairman. He was an older man with a calm face, but everyone knew that nothing escaped his attention. "Let's begin," he said in his usual steady tone. "Dr. Lang, you have the floor." A woman in her late 30s stood up. Her hair was tied back, her expression serious. She was the lead astrophysicist in charge of the new readings from the Deep Space Array. She pressed a key, and the lights dimmed. A holographic display appeared in the air, floating dots representing energy signals near Jupiter's orbit. At first glance, they looked ordinary, but then she zoomed in and the dots rearranged into a pattern. Too perfect, too symmetrical. "These are not random," she said, her voice calm but firm. "They're moving in formation." The room stayed quiet. One of the military representatives leaned forward. "Formation? You mean like ships?" Dr. Lang nodded. "That's what it looks like. And the energy signature matches something familiar. Metallic density, propulsion patterns. It's not alien. It's Terran-built." The word Terran hung in the air. It meant human-made. Everyone looked at one another, trying to process what she had just said. If the readings were correct, it meant that the objects moving beyond Jupiter's orbit weren't meteors, or space debris, or alien probes. They were human ships, but that was impossible. Humanity hadn't sent any official vessels anywhere near that region for years. Ambassador Voss adjusted his glasses, studying the data. "Are you certain these are not false positives?" "Sensor overlap? Reflected signatures?" "I triple-checked the data, Doctor," Lang replied. "It's clean. These are real. And they're moving together, 11 objects in total." A murmur ran through the table. The representatives from different nations exchanged uneasy glances. A few of them whispered to their aides. No one spoke loudly, but the tension in the room was heavy. Finally, the ambassador raised his hand for silence. "Show us their movement pattern." She nodded, and the hologram zoomed out to show the orbits. The objects were approaching from beyond the asteroid belt, slowing down in small intervals. The movement wasn't random. It looked planned, coordinated, almost military. "They're holding position near the Jovian moon Europa," Dr. Lang said softly. "No transmissions detected, but the formation is stable." One of the council's defense analysts frowned. "Could it be an old mission? Maybe unmanned probes?" Dr. Lang shook her head. "Too large. Each structure is roughly the size of a small warship." The word warship made several people straighten up in their seats. "Then whose are they?" another asked. No one answered. The silence stretched until Ambassador Voss spoke again. "Run identification sweeps across all known fleet registries. If these are Terran ships, someone has answers." The meeting paused while his command was carried out. Technicians in the observation room began cross-referencing data. On the large central screen, thousands of ship IDs scrolled past, one after another. But none matched. The longer it went on, the more nervous everyone became. Then, a quiet, alert tone echoed through the chamber. One of the analysts turned pale. "Sir, we found partial registry matches," she said slowly. "They belong to Project Helios." The name drew confused looks from some members, but not from everyone. A few older officials exchanged tense expressions, as if they had just heard a ghost. Project Helios was an experimental space mission launched more than 15 years ago. It was meant to test new propulsion technology using dark matter energy. But after its first deep space jump, communication was lost. Official reports claimed the ships were destroyed. Families were given state honors. The mission was forgotten, at least publicly. But now it seemed those same ships had come back. Ambassador Voss's voice grew heavy. Project Helios was terminated long ago. No vessel could have survived that long without resupply. Dr. Lang didn't look convinced. And yet here they are. The ambassador leaned back, rubbing his forehead. Can we confirm human presence aboard? Not yet, she replied. But the formation behavior suggests active control. Someone whispered from across the table, if that's true, who's commanding them? No one had an answer. For the first time in years, the council seemed unprepared. Their entire system was built on predictability, on knowing what every nation and agency was doing in space. But this was different. This was something they had buried coming back to life. Ambassador Voss finally said, lock down all external communications. No data leaves this room. Until we know what we're dealing with, this stays classified. Everyone nodded silently. They all understood what that meant. To the outside world, nothing unusual was happening. But inside that underground chamber, humanity had just uncovered one of its deepest secrets. The next few hours were filled with tension. The council divided into small groups, studying the data, arguing quietly over possibilities. Some believed it was an elaborate hoax, maybe a trick by rival powers using falsified signals. Others believed the impossible, that the old ships of Project Helios had survived and evolved on their own. Dr. Lang stood by the hologram, still watching the formation as it drifted slowly near Europa. Her assistant whispered, "Do you think they're hostile?" She shook her head. "If they wanted to attack, they could have. They're just watching." That word, watching, sent chills through him. By evening, the council reconvened. The lights dimmed again and the latest data played on the screens. The ships hadn't moved much, but their energy output had changed. It was pulsing rhythmically, like a beacon. "It's a pattern," Dr. Lang said. "Maybe a signal." The room held its breath as the frequency translated into visual form, a steady pulse, repeating every 20 seconds. No message, no language, just rhythm. It didn't seem random. Some kind of code. "Try matching it to known communication protocols," the ambassador ordered. Minutes passed. Then the computer returned a result. The pattern matched an old Terran distress beacon, used only during emergencies. It was last active more than a decade ago, the same code used by Project Helios before they vanished. The room went cold. No one said anything. The ambassador finally spoke, his voice low and tight. "So they're alive. Or something that remembers them," Dr. Lang murmured. He looked at her sharply. "Explain," she hesitated. "If they've been gone this long and if they've somehow survived using dark matter propulsion, there's no way to know what they've become. Time moves differently out there. Radiation, isolation, dark energy effects. It could change everything." Her words hung in the air like a shadow. One of the younger analysts broke the silence. "We should send a probe, get visual confirmation." There was a pause, then slow agreement around the table. A command was issued to redirect one of the Deep Space Survey probes toward the formation. It would take several hours for the probe to reach the fleet and send back visual data. While they waited, some members left to rest, but most stayed, pacing, staring at the screens. The hours dragged on. Then, a soft chime filled the room. "Probe feed incoming," an operator said. Everyone gathered around as the first blurry images came through, tiny shapes floating in darkness. The feed sharpened slowly. The objects were real, massive, metallic. The hulls looked weathered but intact. And then, on one of the ships, the camera zoomed closer and revealed something no one could mistake. Painted across the hull, barely visible through years of cosmic dust, was a familiar symbol, the Terran insignia. Human-made. Clear as day. Several people gasped. Dr. Lang's hand trembled slightly. "They're ours," she whispered. The ambassador leaned forward. "Send a standard ID request. Let's see if they respond." The operator entered the command. A moment later, a thin green light blinked on the screen. The signal had been sent. Then everyone waited. Seconds turned into minutes. No reply. The ambassador was about to call it off when a flicker appeared on the screen. The probe's signal jumped. Static filled the room. Then, through the distortion, a sound emerged. A voice, broken, distant, barely human. "We were never lost, we were abandoned." The words repeated, fading in and out through static. The room was frozen. Every heartbeat felt louder than the hum of the machines. The ambassador's hand slowly lowered from the console. His expression was unreadable. Dr. Lang's eyes stayed fixed on the screen, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're not lost. They came back." No one moved. No one spoke. The meaning of those words began to sink in. The ships, they thought, destroyed, were alive, drifting in silence beyond Jupiter, and whoever was aboard still remembered. That was the moment the council realized this was no longer a scientific meeting. It was the beg. The next day the council gathered again. No one spoke much that morning. Everyone looked tired, their eyes heavy from a night without sleep. What they had heard in that chamber still echoed in their minds, those broken words from the deep void. "We were never lost. We were abandoned." The large screen at the center of the room showed the 11 strange ships still hovering near Jupiter's orbit. Their lights flickered softly, almost like they were alive. A steady pulse of dark energy surrounded them, distorting the nearby space. The council's sensors couldn't read through it clearly, as if the ships were wrapped in a veil of fog made of light. Ambassador Voss sat quietly, reading through an old classified report labeled Project Helios. It was marked Top Secret, Eyes Only. He didn't say a word for a long time. When he finally looked up, his face showed a kind of weary understanding. "We buried this," he said softly, "and now it's come back to question us." The room was silent. Then one of the analysts asked the question everyone was afraid to say out loud. "What if they're angry?" No one replied, but the fear in their eyes gave the answer. To calm the tension, Ambassador Voss opened the meeting formally. "We are here to uncover the truth," he said firmly. "Not to panic." Dr. Lang, who had presented the data yesterday, stood once again. Her voice was steadier this time, but her hands still trembled slightly. "After the transmission, we ran more deep scan readings. The objects haven't moved much, but we detected small energy shifts along their outer hulls. It's like they're preparing for something or adjusting their systems." One of the defense members leaned forward. "Can you identify their technology level?" "That's the strange part," she said. "Some of it matches Earth-made designs, old propulsion systems, heat panels, even the communication arrays. But other readings, they don't belong to any known human technology. It's as if something has been added to them." "Added?" the ambassador asked. "Yes," she replied. "Integrated, not bolted on. Like the ships grew new parts of their own." A heavy silence followed. The thought that human ships could somehow evolve on their own was almost too strange to believe. But everyone in that room had seen things in their careers that once seemed impossible. Ambassador Voss took a deep breath. "If these ships really are the lost Helios fleet, then we must understand what happened to them. Who authorized that project? Who led it?" A few older officials exchanged glances, but no one spoke right away. Finally, one of them, a quiet man from the European division, cleared his throat. Project Helios was launched 15 years ago under the Global Science Accord. It was supposed to explore the dark matter belt beyond Saturn. They used experimental energy drives that could fold space temporarily for faster travel. But during the second test, communication was lost. The official reason was a catastrophic reactor failure. "We never recovered any debris," Dr. Lang asked gently. "So the mission was covered up?" The man hesitated, then nodded. "It was easier that way. The technology used was too dangerous to repeat. The families were told the crews died heroes. Only a few people knew the full truth." "What truth?" Ambassador Voss pressed. "That the dark matter drive might have worked," the man said quietly. "But not in the way we expected." The words sent a ripple through the room. Dr. Lang frowned. You think the drive didn't explode, it transported them? Possibly. But to where or when, we never knew. For a long moment, everyone just sat there letting the idea sink in. It explained how the ships might have survived. But it didn't explain what they had become, or why they were sending that strange message now. Ambassador Voss finally said, "We need confirmation." Until then, we're only speculating. A military officer suggested using long-range drones to collect samples from the ship's wake. Another proposed trying to jam the signal to prevent further transmissions. But Dr. Lang disagreed. If we show aggression, we could lose our chance to communicate. We should listen first. Voss nodded slowly. Listening may be wise, but we must also prepare in case listening turns into defense. He ordered restricted access around the Jovian region. All civilian satellites were redirected. A code-level lockdown was placed on all public astronomy networks. From that moment on, the sighting of those ships became the world's most tightly held secret. Meanwhile, inside the chamber, a small team continued digging into old records. They uncovered a series of Black Project files, missing budget reports, erased crew lists, and unregistered test flights. One file stood out, a report from the final mission of Project Helios labeled Helios 12. It contained the last known message before contact was lost. The text was brief. System breach detected. We see the light. The void is listening. No one knew what that meant. As the hours passed, tension grew. Some members began to argue quietly in corners. One side believed the fleet's return was a gift, a second chance to learn about dark matter. The other side saw danger. What if they're no longer fully human? One whispered. If they've been changed by dark matter, we can't predict how they'll think or what they want. Dr. Lang tried to stay calm, but even she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them back through the data screens. The fleet's lights pulsed in perfect rhythm, as if responding to their observation. Every time they ran a scan, the ships adjusted their energy slightly, almost playfully, as though they were aware of being watched. Late in the night, a new signal appeared. It wasn't a voice this time, but a coded data stream, faint but deliberate. The system began decoding it automatically. Lines of old Terran code scrolled across the monitors. At the bottom of the message appeared a strange timestamp, dated more than a decade in the past. Could this be a time-delayed broadcast? An analyst asked. Dr. Lang shook her head slowly. No, it's live. The source ping matches one of the ships. Ambassador Voss leaned forward. Then someone or something is talking to us. The message was simple, a set of coordinates near Mars. Below it, a single phrase repeated, "Council must answer." That was the moment everything changed. Within minutes, the council chamber was buzzing. Some argued it was a trap. Others insisted it was an invitation. The ambassador listened quietly, then stood. "We will not act on fear," he said. "We'll send a probe to the coordinates. No manned mission until we know what's there." The command was executed quickly. A long-range probe, fitted with encrypted communication gear, was launched toward the coordinates. It would take several hours to reach the area and send back data. During the waiting time, the atmosphere in the chamber shifted from curiosity to unease. Even the guards at the doors looked nervous. The air felt heavy, like the room itself understood the gravity of what was unfolding. When the probe finally reached the coordinates, the monitors came alive again. At first there was only static. Then slowly a faint image appeared, an object floating near Mars's shadow. It wasn't one of the 11 ships. It was smaller, darker, its surface covered in what looked like burnt alloy. The image sharpened and everyone gasped. It was a pod, an escape capsule. On its side, faded but still visible, were the same insignias from Project Helios. "It's Terran," Dr. Lang whispered. "Is there any life reading?" the ambassador asked. "None," the technician replied softly. "But it's broadcasting something." A small signal played through the speakers, a steady heartbeat-like pulse. Then a voice followed, cracked and weary. "This is the Council's doing. We warned them. The light bends and the void remembers." Then silence. No one in the chamber moved. The message had been meant for them. Whoever or whatever sent it knew the Council would be listening. Dr. Lang looked at the ambassador. "They're not just sending warnings. They're reminding us of something we did." He didn't reply. Instead, he turned toward the holographic map showing the 11 ships still waiting beyond Jupiter. "If they remember," he said quietly. Then this is not a reunion. This is a reckoning. Around him, the council members stared at the flickering lights of the returning fleet. For the first time, the thought entered everyone's mind that maybe the danger wasn't from space. It was from their own forgotten creation. That night, the council hall was placed under total lockdown. Guards stood at every exit. All data links were cut off from outside networks. But despite the silence, no one in that underground room could rest. Each person knew deep down that something was coming. Something they couldn't control. And far above Earth, beyond the calm shimmer of Jupiter's orbit, the fleet remained still, like silent witnesses waiting for judgment. The old Terran warships that humanity had once built, then lost, were now watching their creators with a patience that felt almost human. Inside the chamber, a single thought echoed in everyone's mind. If the ships of Project Helios truly survived, then perhaps they carried memories of a truth too dangerous to ever be told. And somewhere out there in the dark, that truth was beginning to wake. The chamber was darker than usual that morning. Most of the lights were off except for the glow of the large screen showing the 11 mysterious ships still hovering near Jupiter's orbit. The room was quiet but not peaceful. Everyone there could feel a kind of invisible pressure, as if the air itself had become heavier. Ambassador Voss walked in slowly. He didn't greet anyone or make his usual calm remarks. He just placed a thin folder on the table and said quietly, "The probe we sent to Mars was destroyed." A wave of shock passed through the room. Dr. Lang stood up. "Destroyed by what?" He shook his head. "We don't know. The signal cut off 2 seconds after the pod's last message. No explosion detected, but the probe vanished from all sensors. It's as if it was erased." The room fell silent again. The word erased carried a strange weight. In space, things could disappear, yes, but to leave behind no trace at all was something else. The ambassador looked at the group and said, "From now on, everything we say here stays here. The outside world must not know until we understand what we're dealing with." One of the younger officers whispered, "But sir, if those ships are ours, then—" "They were ours," Voss interrupted. "Not anymore." He pressed a button and a new image filled the main screen. It was a clearer feed from deep space telescopes. The ships near Jupiter had begun to shift positions again, forming a new pattern. This time, they were arranged in a circle, with one ship at the center. "They're moving again," Dr. Lang said. "Yes," the ambassador replied, "and they're sending another signal." The audio feed began to play, a slow pulse, rhythmic, almost like breathing. Then faintly a voice broke through the static. It was human but distorted, like someone speaking through a storm. "We are returning the signal. The circle is complete. The council must remember." Everyone in the chamber froze. The voice was familiar and not in an abstract way. It had the tone of command of someone who once belonged to them. Dr. Lang stared at the waveform on the screen. "Run voice recognition," she said quietly. The system processed the data for a few seconds, then displayed the result. The match was confirmed with 97% accuracy. The voice belonged to Commander Reese Halen, the leader of Project Helios. Official records listed him as dead. Dr. Lang felt a chill run down her spine. "That's impossible. He's been gone for 15 years. Ambassador Voss leaned forward slowly, his voice low. "Then we're talking to ghosts." The message began repeating, looping through the same phrase. "The council must remember." No one spoke for a while. The only sound was the hum of the computers. Finally, one of the security officers broke the silence. "What do they want us to remember?" "That's what we're going to find out," Voss said. "We'll send a communication attempt using an encrypted Terran code, one that only Project Helios could recognize." He gave the order, and the technicians began preparing the transmission. The chamber was tense, everyone moving carefully as if afraid that one wrong word might cause disaster. When the signal was ready, Dr. Lang spoke through the microphone. Her voice was steady but soft. "This is the Dark Matter Council. We received your message. Identify yourselves." The transmission was sent. Then they waited. Seconds passed. Then a minute. 2. The screen flickered and static filled the speakers again. For a long moment there was only noise. And then, suddenly, the static cleared. A face appeared on the screen. It was a man's face, aged, scarred, but unmistakably human. His eyes were cold but calm, filled with the kind of understanding that comes from seeing things no one should see. He looked straight into the camera and spoke. "You left us in the dark," he said. "We waited for orders that never came. We called, but no one answered. Now we returned to ask why." The chamber was completely still. Dr. Lang's voice was almost a whisper. "Commander Halen, you're alive." The man gave a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Alive, perhaps not in the way you think. We are changed. The light we followed turned into something else. It showed us the truth about your council, about the lies that built your peace." Ambassador Voss stepped forward, his face unreadable. "This is Ambassador Voss of the Dark Matter Council. Project Helios was presumed lost. No one abandoned you." The commander's expression hardened. "You sealed our fate the moment you cut our signal. We saw the transmission logs. You knew we made contact. You shut us down because you were afraid of what we found." "Contact?" Dr. Lang asked quickly. "With what?" The man didn't answer directly. He turned his head slightly, and behind him faint lights moved, dark shapes floating like shadows. "Something that listens," he said. "Something that exists between light and void." It spoke to us in the silence of space. It showed us how fragile human truth is. The feed flickered again. Static broke the image apart, but before it vanished, the commander said one last thing. "We come not to destroy, but to remind." Then the screen went black. The chamber was filled with stunned silence. No one moved for several seconds. Finally, the ambassador said quietly, "Cut all channels. I want that transmission analyzed frame by frame." As the technicians got to work, Dr. Lang sat down, her mind spinning. "He's right about one thing," she said softly. "The old logs, they were classified before we could review them. What if there really was contact before they disappeared?" The ambassador looked at her, his expression tired. "If that's true, then the council covered it up for a reason. And now the truth is coming back to find us," she said. Later that evening, as most members left the room, Dr. Lang stayed behind, studying the still image of the commander's face frozen on her monitor. There was something strange about his eyes. They didn't reflect light the way normal human eyes did. It was as if they absorbed it. She zoomed in, analyzing the digital frame. Hidden within the background static, faint symbols appeared, patterns made of light. She enhanced them, and her heart began to race. They weren't random. They matched dark matter frequency diagrams, ones from the original Helios Drive experiments. Someone had embedded them inside the transmission, almost like a secret code. She saved the data and ran a simulation. When the diagram was reconstructed, it revealed something shocking. A large wave-like formation deep in space, stretching between Jupiter and Saturn. It wasn't a ship or an asteroid, it was energy. And it was pulsing in the same rhythm as the fleet's lights. She called the ambassador immediately. When he returned, she showed him the display. "It's not just them," she said. "Something else is out there, connected to them." He studied the screen in silence. "You think it's alive?" "I think it's aware," she said. "And I think it's watching both them and us." The ambassador looked at her, then at the glowing pattern on the screen. "If they made contact with something like this 15 years ago, then humanity isn't just facing a lost fleet," he said slowly. "We're facing whatever changed them." The next hours were filled with hushed discussions and cautious decisions. The council agreed to classify the new data under Level Black, meaning only a handful of people would ever see it. They also agreed to prepare defense protocols just in case, but Dr. Lang couldn't rest. She replayed the commander's message again and again, listening to every tone in his voice, every pause, every flicker in his expression. Despite his anger, there was something human still in his words, a sense of loss, maybe even sorrow. That night, long after the others had left, she sat alone in the chamber. On the screen, the 11 ships floated silently against the dark backdrop of space. The circular formation they had made looked almost like a symbol, a message written across the stars. Then something unexpected happened. The ship's lights began to shift again. Slowly, carefully, they rearranged themselves into a new pattern. Dr. Lang's eyes widened as the formation stabilized. It was unmistakable. The pattern formed the exact shape of Earth's orbit. She stared in disbelief. "They're coming here," she whispered. Within minutes, alarms began to sound throughout the complex. The ambassador returned with the others. Everyone watched as the holographic map updated. The 11 ships were leaving Jupiter's orbit, heading toward the inner solar system. Ambassador Voss spoke in a low voice, almost to himself. They said the circle was complete. Maybe this is what they meant. No one dared to ask what would happen next. The Council had spent years studying the universe, trying to understand its mysteries. Now one of those mysteries was on its way home, built by human hands lost in the darkness, and now returning with questions no one was ready to answer. And somewhere, deep in the void between the planets, the strange wave of dark energy moved with them, like a shadow following the fleet. Dr. Lang watched the faint lights on the screen growing closer, their slow movement steady and deliberate. She felt fear, yes, but also something else. A quiet sense that whatever was coming wasn't just about ships or technology. It was about memory, about something humanity had tried to forget. In the silence of the chamber, she whispered, "They're not attacking. They're reminding us." But even she didn't know what exactly they were reminding them of. Outside, far beyond the reach of any telescope the public could access, the lost Terran warships glided toward Earth, calm, silent, carrying with them the echoes of a truth buried 15 years ago. And on Earth, the Council waited, knowing that when those ships finally arrived, nothing would ever be the same again. The silence inside the Council chamber was heavy, the kind of silence that carries both fear and disbelief. The lights glowed dimly over the long table where screens flickered with blurred images of ships moving through space. No one spoke for several seconds after the last feed came through. Then one of the analysts quietly whispered, "Those ships, they're ours." Everyone turned to the central display. The metallic surfaces of the ships carried the unmistakable markings of Terran origin. The symbols, though faded, were still visible under the glare of reflected sunlight. One of the technicians zoomed in, adjusting the image. The markings matched records from an old classified file. Project Helios. Project Helios was supposed to be humanity's most ambitious mission. Launched in the early 2030s, it was meant to test new propulsion engines and explore dark matter boundaries beyond Saturn's orbit. But after one final transmission, the entire fleet vanished without a trace. No signals, no wreckage, nothing. The official explanation said the experiment failed. The files were locked away and the project's existence quietly erased. Now nearly 2 decades later, those ships had reappeared. Larger, darker, and strangely modified. The engines pulsed with energy patterns that did not match any known Terran design. One of the senior scientists leaned forward, his voice shaking slightly as he said, "If this is real, then those ships have survived out there all this time. But how and why come back now?" The Council members exchanged uncertain looks. The chairman ordered the communications team to establish a direct link, but every attempt was met with silence. Static filled the speakers. Then a faint echo like a heartbeat came through, a repeating pulse of sound. The technicians filtered the noise, and soon a voice broke through, though distorted and weak. The words sent chills across the room. "We were never lost. We were abandoned." The Council members froze. The voice was clearly human, but it carried something else, an unnatural echo, as if another presence spoke behind it. The technicians ran frequency tests, but the signal contained fragments that didn't align with human patterns. Some believed it was interference. Others whispered it was something else entirely. The chairman ordered an emergency session. Within an hour, every member of the Dark Matter Council was back in their seats. The doors were sealed. No one was allowed to leave or transmit messages outside. The room felt colder than before. Dr. Ria Lang, one of the analysts who had first identified the Terran symbols, stood before the large display. "The message isn't just a distress call," she explained softly. "There are embedded codes within the signal. Old encryption, Terran military from before the Helios project disappeared." She pressed a button and the screen filled with layers of coded text. "This transmission includes data logs, mission reports, coordinates, even personal notes. Someone out there wants us to see this." As she spoke, the room's tension deepened. The more they decoded, the more disturbing the data became. The logs described experiments with dark matter energy fields, propulsion failures, and crew exposure to unknown radiation. Then the last recorded entry from the fleet's command ship appeared. "Contact made." The dark responds, "Integration begins." The word integration left everyone uneasy. No one could agree on what it meant. Hours turned into night and the Council worked without rest. The decoded coordinates revealed the current position of the fleet. near Mars orbit. Satellite systems were immediately redirected, and soon, high-resolution visuals confirmed it. A formation of 6 massive vessels hovering in silence, facing Earth's direction. The images caused chaos within global agencies. Space defense units were alerted, and multiple governments demanded answers. The Dark Matter Council, once a hidden scientific committee, suddenly became the center of global panic. Inside the chamber, discussions grew heated. Some members insisted on contacting the fleet again, believing they were survivors who needed help. Others argued they were a potential threat, especially after their cryptic message. The chairman tried to maintain order, but fear had already taken hold. Late that night, new data arrived. The fleet had emitted short bursts of energy, dark energy pulses that disabled several observation satellites. No explosions, no attacks, just silence afterward. The precision suggested they knew exactly which systems were watching them. "They're warning us," one member said quietly. "They're saying they don't want to be seen." The chairman's face turned pale. "Or they're preparing something." Meanwhile, inside the monitoring lab, Rhea stayed behind after others left for a short break. She continued to analyze the signal, following her instinct that something was hidden within. She replayed the voice recording again and again, filtering layers until she discovered faint background patterns. Beneath the human voice, another sound lingered, a whispering frequency that wasn't random. When converted into visual form, it resembled moving shapes, almost like symbols or fragments of written language. She ran the data through old Helios archives. To her horror, she found a perfect match. The same symbols appeared in the final experiment reports before the fleet vanished. It wasn't just a distress call. It was a message intertwined with something non-human. When she brought the discovery to the chairman, the entire council reconvened at once. The room was tense, filled with the sound of rustling papers and clicking keyboards. Rhea explained everything, her voice steady but strained. The fleet must have encountered an unknown phenomenon, something intelligent, possibly living. Whatever it was, it left a mark on them. Maybe it changed them. A deep silence followed. Someone finally asked, "Changed? How?" Rhea didn't answer. She didn't know. Moments later, the communications officer interrupted. "New transmission from the fleet." The council members gathered around the main screen. This time the message wasn't just audio, it was video. Static filled the display before slowly revealing a dark corridor, dimly lit and filled with mechanical sounds. The camera adjusted, showing a man standing before it, his face gaunt, eyes hollow, skin pale under the cold light. He wore an old Terran uniform, torn and discolored. "Council," he began in a quiet, tired voice, "if you're receiving this, then we've made it home. But it's not the same home we left." He paused, breathing heavily. "We were promised discovery. Instead, we found something that watched us from inside the dark. It offered us survival when everything else failed. But it asked for more than we could understand. We became part of it." His eyes shifted away from the camera as he whispered, "You called us lost. You erased us. But we didn't vanish. We evolved." Then the screen went black. No one spoke. The technicians tried to re-establish the feed, but the signal had already cut off. The only trace left behind was a short text transmission repeating every minute. "Council terminated our kinship. We return as witnesses." The words appeared again and again until the chairman finally ordered the feed shut down. Outside the chamber, the world had begun to react. News leaks spread across hidden networks and private forums. People speculated that the government had made contact with something beyond human. Some called it a hoax. Others feared it was the beginning of a conflict no one could control. Inside the council, everything changed. Sleep became a luxury. Teams worked around the clock to decode more fragments from the fleet's transmissions. Each new discovery deepened the mystery. There were mentions of the threshold, the integration, and the return. None of it made sense, yet all of it pointed to one truth. The lost fleet was no longer entirely human. Rhea found herself staring out the chamber's observation window, watching the stars beyond Earth's atmosphere. She couldn't stop thinking about the man's face in the video, the way his eyes seemed both alive and distant, as if something else was looking through him. What if they didn't just survive? She whispered to herself. What if they became something new? The following morning, as the council gathered for another emergency discussion, a new alert appeared on the main display. The fleet had moved closer, to the orbit of Mars, directly facing Earth. Their formation was deliberate, symmetrical, almost ceremonial. The chairman stood, his voice calm but heavy. "They're not attacking," he said slowly. "They're waiting." For what, no one could say. But deep down, everyone in that room felt it. The return of the lost fleet wasn't a coincidence. It was a reckoning. Something from humanity's own creation had come back to question the truth that had been buried for years. And as the screens dimmed and the room filled with quiet dread, one thought echoed in every mind. Whatever had happened out there in the dark, it wasn't over. It was only the beginning. The next morning came with no sunrise for the council members. None of them had slept. The air in the underground chamber was heavy, filled with the low hum of machines and the weight of questions no one could answer. The lost fleet had moved closer to Earth's orbit, and now every second mattered. The chairman stood at the front of the long table, staring at the main screen where 6 Terran warships floated in perfect formation. Their surfaces gleamed faintly under sunlight, but strange dark lines pulsed across their hulls, like veins carrying some kind of energy. They looked human, yet somehow not. "Are they preparing for contact?" one of the analysts asked in a whisper. No one answered. The truth was, nobody knew. The fleet had been silent since the last message. No words, no signals, only that repeating text. "Council terminated our kinship. We return as witnesses." The council was divided now. Half believed these ships carried survivors who had been altered by something unknown and needed help. The other half saw them as a threat, a reminder of what happens when humanity's ambition goes too far. The chairman took a deep breath and said, "We have one chance to talk before this escalates. If they don't respond peacefully, we risk panic across the planet. Every satellite, every radar is already watching." The communication officers began setting up the long-range transmission. The room was quiet except for the sound of buttons clicking and screens flickering. The energy in the air felt almost electric. When the signal was ready, the chairman leaned toward the microphone and spoke clearly, his voice calm but firm. "This is the Dark Matter Council speaking from Earth Command. You are identified as Terran vessels of Project Helios. We seek peaceful communication. Please respond." For several seconds there was only static. Then the static deepened into a strange vibration, like a whispering echo that passed through every speaker in the room. It wasn't just sound, it felt like pressure in the chest, a sensation that made everyone's heart beat faster. Then slowly, a face appeared on the central screen. It was a man, human, but worn, his skin pale and his eyes shadowed. The background behind him was metallic, filled with dim blue light. He wore a uniform with the Helios insignia, but it was torn and discolored. His expression was calm, though there was something distant about it, as if he had lived in silence for far too long. "This is Commander Elan," he said. His voice carried both human warmth and a strange echo beneath it. "We heard your message," the chairman straightened. "Commander, we believed your fleet was lost." "What happened to your mission?" Elan's lips curved slightly, not into a smile but into something unreadable. "You called it lost. We called it rebirth." The room went still. He continued, "Our mission succeeded at first. We crossed the boundary of dark space. We found what you feared to understand. We reached the heart of what you call the void. And it reached back." The chairman frowned, trying to process his words. "Are you saying you made contact with something?" "Yes," Elan said softly. "Something vast. It spoke without words, through energy and thought. It showed us survival when our systems failed, but survival required transformation. We became what the void needed us to be." His tone was calm, but there was weight in every word. The analysts looked at one another uneasily. No one dared to interrupt. Elan's eyes glowed faintly as he looked straight into the camera. "When we tried to send our findings home, the council cut the link. You erased our records. You let our families believe we were gone. You wanted the void to remain a mystery." The chairman tried to reply, but Elan raised a hand. "Now we return to remind you. The void is no longer silent, it sees. It remembers." The transmission began to distort. The image flickered with interference, and for a brief moment, several shapes appeared behind the commander. Humanoid figures, still and silent, as though made of both flesh and light. Then the feed stabilized again. The chairman finally managed to speak. "Commander Elan, this is not a confrontation. We wish to understand and assist your return." Elan tilted his head. "Return? he repeated softly. There is no return. We are not what we were. We are not yours to command. And then the screen went black. The silence that followed was crushing. Everyone in the chamber seemed frozen, trying to absorb what they had just witnessed. The only sound was the steady hum of the power systems. One of the younger members finally spoke. He's warning us. They don't want to come back, they want something else. Rhea, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. He said it remembers. Whatever they found out there, it's not just technology. It's alive, or at least aware. And now through them it's watching us. The chairman rubbed his temples, exhaustion clear on his face. If that's true, we have to prepare for every possibility. But we cannot fire the first shot. If they mean no harm, an attack could destroy any chance of peace. By evening, Earth's defense networks were on full alert. Terran warships in lunar orbit were instructed to hold position, but prepare countermeasures. Civilian networks were locked down under communications interference tests. Inside the Council, tension grew by the minute. The fleet remained motionless near Mars, but new readings showed massive energy activity within their ships, like a buildup before a release. Suddenly, the communication officer shouted, "Incoming transmission, priority code!" Everyone turned. The message wasn't visual this time. It was a data burst coded in the same pattern as old Terran military logs. Once decoded, a short message appeared on screen. The archives must open. Truth cannot stay buried. The Council fell silent again. The meaning was clear. The Lost Fleet wanted access to Earth's classified dark matter archives, the same data that had been sealed since Project Helios vanished. The chairman hesitated. If we give them access, they'll know everything. Our technology, our vulnerabilities. But if we refuse, he didn't finish his sentence. Everyone already knew the risk. Rhea spoke softly. Maybe that's all they want. The truth. They feel betrayed. Or they want what we kept from them, another replied sharply. Something inside those archives may be dangerous. Outside the chamber, Earth's defense scanners suddenly detected energy distortions around the fleet. It wasn't an attack, but it wasn't peaceful either. A faint glowing web of light extended from one ship to another, like a living network pulsing in unison. The chairman gave the order. Stay on monitoring only. No engagement. But just as the command was issued, every communication channel went dark. Screens flickered, lights dimmed, and the entire council complex trembled slightly. A low-frequency signal filled the room, and then Alon's face appeared again, uninvited, overriding every security barrier. You still think you control this? He said, his voice low and calm. But control was lost long ago. The void doesn't forget, it only waits. He paused, and for the first time his expression softened. We are not here to destroy. We are here to show what your silence cost us. Behind him the figures moved again, slow, graceful and strange. They didn't seem human anymore. Yet they carried a presence that felt almost familiar, like ghosts of something long lost. Elan continued. When we were left out there, we learned that the universe listens. It listens to every thought, every choice. You can bury truth, but not consequence. Then his final words echoed through the chamber. You called us your pioneers. Now we are your reflection. The signal cut out, leaving the council in total silence. For several minutes, no one spoke. The room was filled with quiet breathing and the sound of distant machinery. Finally, the chairman said, he didn't threaten us. He demanded truth. Maybe the first step is to face what we've done. But before any decision could be made, a loud alarm blared across the facility. The defense network had picked up massive energy spikes near the fleet. Yet, instead of moving toward Earth, the ships were vanishing one by one, dissolving into bright waves of light. Where are they going? Someone shouted. The sensors failed to track them. Within moments, the fleet was gone, leaving only empty space behind. But a faint transmission lingered, repeating in the same calm voice. We were your beginning. We may be your end. Remember us. As the final signal faded, the council members sat in stunned silence. Rhea looked around at the faces filled with confusion and guilt. They didn't come for war, she said softly. They came for recognition. For truth, the chairman slowly nodded. And now they've vanished again. But this time, they're not lost. Outside, the stars above Earth burned quietly, hiding whatever mystery lingered in the dark. Somewhere beyond the reach of any telescope, the fleet drifted into the unseen depths, half human, half something else, carrying with them the memory of what humanity had created and forgotten. The council members knew the world could never know the full truth. But deep down they also knew one thing for certain. The void wasn't empty anymore. It was watching. The council chamber was unusually quiet that morning. The air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. For hours no one had spoken a word. The screen showed nothing but static, no signals, no traces, no signs of the fleet that had vanished into the dark the night before. The chairman sat at the far end of the long table, staring at the frozen screen where the last message from Commander Ilan had played. "We were your beginning. We may be your end. Remember us." Those words echoed in everyone's minds, looping like a haunting memory that refused to fade. One by one, the council members arrived, faces pale and sleepless. Some carried files, others held tablets filled with unfinished reports, but none of it mattered anymore. The world outside was already changing. Satellite systems across the planet had started to malfunction. Communication lines flickered on and off. Some claimed to see faint pulses of light moving across the night sky, as if something invisible was circling Earth. The chairman finally spoke, his voice low. "We can't keep this hidden much longer. Too many systems are failing. Too many questions are being asked." Rhea looked up from her monitor, her expression calm but tired. "If we reveal everything, panic will spread. But if we don't, we'll be repeating the same mistake that created this mess." He nodded slowly. "The fleet wanted truth. But what if the truth isn't something humanity can bear to hear?" No one answered. The tension in the room was thick enough to feel. Suddenly, one of the technicians stood up in alarm. "Sir, something's happening." All eyes turned to the main screen. The static was breaking apart. Lines of digital interference formed patterns, then symbols, those same strange markings that had appeared in the fleet's transmissions. The symbols pulsed, almost alive, rearranging themselves until a familiar voice broke through. It was Ilan. "This is not an invasion," his voice said softly. "This is your reflection." The chamber lights flickered, and then every system in the building went offline. Total darkness swallowed the room for several seconds. The hum of power faded, replaced by an eerie silence. Then, faint emergency lights flickered back to life, glowing red across the metal walls. On one of the smaller screens, an image appeared. A live feed from an external satellite that had somehow reconnected. The image showed something extraordinary, just beyond Earth's orbit. A faint ring of light was forming. It wasn't a physical object, it looked like energy, shimmering like a ripple in water. Within it, shadows moved. Massive outlines of ships, almost transparent, fading in and out of sight. It was as if the fleet had returned, not entirely in this dimension, but close enough to be seen. "They're back," someone whispered. The chairman leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. "Open a channel." The technicians tried, but no response came through. Instead, the lights in the room began to pulse in the same rhythm as the ring of light on the screen. The connection wasn't through communication, it was through frequency. The fleet wasn't speaking with words anymore. It was speaking through energy. Rhea adjusted her device and began decoding the pulses. Slowly, words began forming on her monitor. She read them aloud as they appeared. "Truth denied becomes infection. We were your cure. Now we are your proof." Her voice trembled as she continued. "We never meant to leave. We became what you feared. We carry what you buried." The message ended abruptly, replaced by silence once more. The chairman stood up, his expression unreadable. "They're not threatening us. They're reminding us. Everything we hid, everything we erased, they want it remembered. But why now?" Another member asked. "Why come back after all these years?" Rhea looked thoughtful. "Maybe they're not here to destroy us. Maybe they're warning us. Whatever they found out there, it's still out there. And maybe it's coming this way." Before anyone could reply, the ground beneath them vibrated slightly. The monitors flickered again, this time showing a sudden surge of energy spreading from the ring of light. It wasn't an attack, it looked like a wave expanding outward across space. It passed through Earth's orbit, through satellites, through the atmosphere, and then everything went still again. The power slowly returned. Systems rebooted one by one, but something strange had changed. Every digital device in the room displayed the same line of text, even those not connected to the main system. "The void listens." It appeared on laptops, tablets, even old equipment that hadn't been used in years. It was everywhere. Outside, reports started flooding in. Power grids flickered across multiple countries. Astronomers reported seeing brief lights near the upper atmosphere, soft blue glows that disappeared as quickly as they came. Some said it looked like lightning trapped in the stars. Others thought it was communication. Inside the council, panic was rising again. Is this a sign of invasion? Someone asked desperately. The chairman raised a hand to calm them. No, if they wanted to attack, they would have done it already. This is something else. They're showing us that they're still here. Watching. Waiting. He turned to Rhea. Can we trace where that energy wave originated? She checked her instruments, analyzing the data. After a moment, she looked up, eyes wide. The origin isn't from the fleet's position. It's from deep space, far beyond the solar system. Whatever connected with them, it's calling again. The room went silent. For the first time, everyone realized what that meant. The fleet hadn't come back just to confront the council. They had come to deliver a message from something much greater, something that existed beyond human understanding. The chairman's voice was barely a whisper. They weren't the threat. They were the warning. Outside, the world continued as normal. News stations reported strange satellite issues but avoided speculation. The truth was still hidden, locked behind the council's sealed walls. But the people inside knew the secret could not stay buried forever. Later that night, Rhea walked alone through the observation corridor. The windows revealed a clear view of the stars. For a moment, everything seemed calm. But as she stared deeper into the darkness, she noticed something faint. Tiny flickers of blue light moving across the distance. She remembered the commander's last words. We were your beginning. A quiet thought crossed her mind. What if humanity was never meant to explore the dark? What if the dark had always been exploring us? The next morning, the council reconvened for one final session. The chairman entered holding a sealed folder. He placed it on the table and looked around at the tired faces before him. This will be our last meeting, he said softly. The fleet has vanished again. Their signal has faded completely. But we all know what we saw, what we heard. We can't erase this, not again. He opened the folder, revealing a printed document. Across the top were the words, Classified Terran warships identified. This report, he continued, and will never reach the public. It will be stored under restricted access. But one day someone will find it. And when they do, they'll understand that humanity once stood on the edge of something vast and unknown. Rhea looked up. And when that day comes? The chairman gave a faint, tired smile. Then maybe we'll be ready to face the truth. As the meeting ended, the members left one by one, their footsteps echoing softly through the empty hallways. The lights dimmed as the systems powered down, and the heavy doors closed behind them. For a long time, the chamber remained silent. Then, just before the lights shut off completely, one of the screens flickered on for a brief second. A single line of text appeared, glowing faintly in white. Terran warships identified. Engagement deferred, humanity observed. The screen faded to black, and the room went still. Far above Earth, in the cold quiet of space, the faint ring of light appeared once more, briefly, beautifully, before disappearing into the endless dark. And though the world below carried on unaware, somewhere in the depths of that darkness, unseen eyes were still watching, listening, and waiting for the moment humanity was ready to face what it had long denied. Because the truth, as the council had learned too late, doesn't disappear. It waits in silence, just like the void.